The entire planet is indirectly a victim of narcissistic abuse. We don't know how to recognize narcissists like Putin or Trump in time to prevent them from getting into power and causing conflicts and wars. I don't like the subject of narcissism, and I would like to avoid it. But it's probably the most important subject for humans, and we do have to understand it well if we want to survive as a species. Trump popularized narcissism, but it's not a new problem. It has existed as long as humans have. We have always had wars, toxic rulers, domestic abuse, and narcissists are the common thread running through all of that. It's a popular word today, narcissism, but it's not really understood by anyone, and too often, not even by their victims. Which brings me to a very public example. So today I want to talk about why victims of narcissistic abuse tend to stay silent about it. I'll talk about Melania too, but this isn't about American politics. This is about psychology, the abusive behavioral patterns that happen in every country and in both rich and poor families. I empathize with Melania, not because we were born in the same country, Yugoslavia, but because I empathize with any victim of abuse. And if you're married to a narcissist, you're a victim. But I do believe that Melania should have come out with the truth. When you're so prominent and you have a global platform, you have a unique responsibility. Melania could have even prevented her husband from getting elected the first time even, and the second time, instead of contributing to his false image as a family man. So why did the film about Melania flop? People don't care about a model who married a rich guy. People are tired of fakeness. They want the truth. So what we got in this movie was a fake managed story and funded by Trump's political allies, probably to distract everyone with a piece of positive, curated content. I didn't see a movie either, but I mean, he would never pay for the true story or even let it be released. Of course, her reasons for staying silent are understandable, whatever they are, just like those of any victim of abuse. I don't want to do victim blaming, but I think she didn't do the right thing. She should have come out, because the scale of this problem is too big. Imagine if we'd gotten the real story, if Melania used her prominent position to say, this is what it really is like to be married to a narcissist, she would have become one of the most famous survivors of narcissistic abuse in the world. Johnny Depp is pretty famous too, but yeah, money and fame don't protect you from narcissistic abuse. And millions of people, both men and women, would have seen themselves in her story. They would have felt seen. They might have even gone to the cinema for that. So she could have thrown a spotlight on a form of abuse that is one of humanity's biggest open secrets, because it's everywhere. When we talk about domestic abuse, we're talking about narcissists. When we talk about authoritarian regimes, we are talking about narcissists. They come to power and they ruin any system. And whether someone has enough traits for a formal diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder, the victims don't care. Most narcissists will never be diagnosed anyway. They're not going to see a psychologist because they don't see their manipulation, dishonesty, cruelty as a problem. Trump was diagnosed by his niece, who is a clinical psychologist, and also she knows the family dynamics from the inside. She wrote a book about him called How My Family Created the World's Most Dangerous Man. So why do victims and survivors of narcissistic abuse so rarely tell the truth publicly? There are several reasons. Gaslighting, it makes them doubt their own memory and perceptions. So they worry that they might be making it up or overreacting, because narcissists constantly put the victim down and blame them for everything. They call them too sensitive, overreacting, or crazy. And this steady drip of criticism, it wears away their self-trust. So after a while, they feel confused and start doubting their own reality. Also, often they feel shame for letting it happen or staying so long or choosing the abuser in the first place, even though it wasn't their fault. When they do try to talk about it, people often don't believe them because narcissists usually work hard to look kind, charming, generous in public. So the reaction they get is often, oh, but he seems so nice, or she would never do that. And that only confirms their fear that no one will really believe them or support them. Also, narcissistic abusers tend to slowly isolate their target from friends and family. So often the victim feels that they don't have anyone safe to open up to. On top of that, there's a trauma bonding. So narcissists can sometimes be extremely loving, attentive, flattering, generous. They may promise a better future, make big plans, which is called future faking. They love bomb their partner. And all of that creates an emotional bond. So the survivor is both scared of the abuser and really genuinely cares about them. So it doesn't want to feel like they're betraying them or, by speaking up. Many victims hope that narcissists will finally change, so they don't want to give up on that hope. They don't want to risk the relationship. They don't want to shatter the image they hold on to of who this person really is. But the main reason I think victims don't come out is fear. So they're afraid because they've lived with this person, then they know what they're capable of. Though sometimes they only find out after they leave. A narcissist's number one driving force is their supply, so the attention, the admiration, or the fear that they feed off of. So if you cut that supply by exposing them, you become a threat. And then narcissists don't forgive it, don't let things go. They take revenge. And they will start a campaign to completely destroy you. They will come after you, like emotionally, financially, legally. They will smear your reputation to anyone who will listen. They will turn others against you. Worst of all, they will use your children as weapons against you. So everyone should know how to recognize a narcissist in time, because once you had children with them, you're in a bad position. Whether the narcissist is a man or a woman, they will drag you and the children through court, like for years. And they will use the child to cause you as much emotional pain as they can. In the worst case, they might even kill a child just to punish the other parent. Most narcissists don't kill directly because they aren't pure psychopaths. So they wouldn't do something that will put them in jail. If they come to power, and they tend to, they might be responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people, but they will rarely kill someone directly and risk ending up in jail. They will more likely end up in the White House or Kremlin instead of jail. But they are masters at emotional and psychological violence, and most victims will describe that as more painful than the physical violence. Although a narcissist will also be physically violent if they assess that they can get away with it. And their victims know this. So staying is not cowardly, it's a survival instinct. I use the word narcissist deliberately because they're also called manipulators, toxic people, high conflict personalities. I like to call a spade, because their behavioral patterns are well studied and very recognizable. So we know exactly what we're talking about when we talk about narcissism. So it's the manipulation, the lies, the gaslighting, the cruelty, the triangulation, the lack of empathy. By the way, they see empathy as a weakness. So that's a sign of emotional maturity that all narcissists share. They will use divide and conquer strategies. They will pit, for example, nation against a minority or against a neighboring nation. And that way they turn small dissatisfaction into hatred and the readiness to kill the enemy. That's narcissism. So narcissistic abuse ruins millions of lives silently. It's a global, permanent pandemic of emotional violence. And everybody deserves to live without abuse. So by choosing not to talk about it, Melania failed to use a huge opportunity to raise awareness, to increase understanding of what exactly narcissistic abuse is. And it's a much bigger problem than her family. In my video about Picasso, I talk about Françoise Gillot. She was the only woman who dared to leave Pablo Picasso. He was a narcissist who tried to destroy her career after she left him. He also tried to prevent her book about their marriage to be published, but she managed to publish it and to tell the truth. And she did build a beautiful, full life after him. So she's a great example for other narcissistic abuse victims of how they can also become survivors. I consider survivors former victims who have escaped, who have removed themselves from the narcissist, who have understood and admitted to themselves and others what's happening to them and decided not to tolerate it. Well, I mean, of course, exit and escape, it has to be well planned and safe. And the word victim, it does best describe the state of being in it or freshly out of it, so you feel powerless, traumatized. You're in permanent fight or flight state where your immune system isn't doing its job. Victim is not a shameful word. Dr. Ramani says that if the wounds of narcissistic abuse victims would be visible, they would urgently be transported to the hospital, but the wounds are not visible. So there is a life after a narcissist, whether it's a former wife or husband or a family you were born into. You can find a healthy environment, healthy relationships, or a happy, peaceful life alone. But first, the truth has to come out. This is why education is crucial. Understanding narcissism helps victims recognize what exactly is happening to them, which is the first step to breaking free. It gives them clarity to see why they must remove themselves from the abuse. And it's especially hard for people who grew up with it. So they don't even know what a healthy environment is. And often they've been programmed to feel abuse as love because that's what they receive from their parents or one parent. And yeah, these pre-abused people, they're classic targets for narcissists. But it can happen to anyone to fall victim to a narcissist. The smartest people can and do fall for narcissistic manipulation. I consider myself a survivor of narcissistic abuse, not a victim, even though I'm still getting sued by my sister. I'm under legal and financial abuse, but I went no contact years ago, and I'm living my life fully and authentically. I'm telling the truth. I'm happy. I'm not walking on eggshells around a narcissist, and I will never do it again because I can recognize them very quickly now. Melania, on the other hand, and many other women and men are still victims. And that's why we have to talk about it more. We have to introduce it as a subject into every school curriculum. Education about narcissistic behavioral patterns will help millions of victims to go from a victim to survivor. It's also a survival skill for society, because this knowledge will help us make wise decisions from our relationships, our environment, to our votes. I'd like to hear your story. If you know anyone, or if you are a survivor or a victim of narcissistic abuse, let me know in the comments.